Outlaw Nation, Chapter 1. On October 10th, 1970, Roger stepped off the plane in New York City. Everything he owned in the world was in a large, Army-issued duffel bag, slung over his shoulder. 32 hours earlier, he was on patrol with his unit in the jungles of Southeast Asia. As he looked down at his boots, he could still see the dried-up red clay mud from the village where he lived for the past 18 months. His second tour of duty in Vietnam was over, and Roger was now a civilian. He didn't have any family to speak of. His high school girlfriend had broken off their relationship in a letter she sent him 2 weeks after he completed basic training. He never really had any true friends, being a loner most of his life. He had an aunt and an uncle who lived on a farm several hours upstate. They didn't know he was being discharged, and Roger wasn't even sure that they ever even knew he was in the Army at all. He hadn't seen or talked to them since his father's funeral over a decade ago. But with nowhere else to go, it seemed as good a place as any to start. He purchased a bus ticket to Rochester, stowed his gear, and climbed aboard the bus. Roger sat looking out the window as the bus rolled peacefully down the road. He had only been out of the country for 3 years, but everything seemed so different. He had a feeling that he could not ignore, a feeling that he did not belong here. In fact, he felt as though he did not really belong anywhere. At 23 years old, he was an airborne ranger and a Green Beret. For the last year and a half, he lived in a remote village in the central highlands of Vietnam near the Laotian border. He had come to know and love the native Montagnard people with whom he lived. He was trained as a medic and was responsible for the health and safety of the 12 Americans as well as the 2,300 natives who lived in the village. He truly loved it there. But now, here he was, back in America, back in the country of his birth. Yet he did not feel like he was home. About 3 hours into the trip, the bus rolled into a dirt lot adjacent to a truck stop and diner. The driver got on the PA system and announced the bathroom and lunch stop. 30 minutes, he said. He looked at his watch. This bus pulls out at 1:43. If you're not on it, you're a long way from anywhere. Then he opened the door, got up and walked off the bus toward the diner. As Roger stepped off the bus, he looked across the road and saw smoke billowing from a metal chimney pipe. His stomach growled from the aroma. The sign on the building said, "The Barbecue Pit." The word bar was in larger letters and painted in bolder color. The smoke told him that would be a better stop than the diner, and he thought to himself how he would so enjoy a cold beer. The place was busy, and he found himself a spot at the bar and placed his order. As he drank his beer and waited for his pulled pork sandwich to arrive, 3 men walked up and stood behind him. The one in front was a large man, about 300 pounds, mostly muscle. He had long, greasy hair and hadn't shaved in a week. Roger recognized the olive drab vest the man was wearing as a GI issue flak jacket with the sleeves cut off. No doubt because they were too narrow to encompass his huge arms. The 2 men behind him were of average build and each wore some article of clothing that identified them as ex-military as well. Roger looked up at the big man who was standing inches from him. "Can I help you, hoss?" he asked. The big man just smiled and looked back at his associates. As the bartender was placing Roger's sandwich on the bar, the big man reached out and snatched it from the plate. He took a big bite of the sandwich, never taking his eyes off of Roger. He dropped it back on the plate, which was on the bar now in front of him, and grabbed a handful of fries and devoured them as well. Roger stood up and started to walk for the door. The two men with the big man stepped to the side to block his way. Roger paused and sighed and looked back at them for a moment. He turned and faced the big man. "Look," he said, "I'm not looking for any trouble here, Hoss." The big man let out a chuckle. "Well, I'm afraid you found some regardless," he answered. Roger quickly surveyed the situation. Looking at all three men, he started to turn away from the big man and quickly spun back toward him. With an open hand, he thrust his palm into the man's Adam's apple, and he went down hard and fast, gasping for air, struggling to take his next breath. In the same motion, he spun back around, grabbing a long-necked beer bottle off the bar. As he did, he smashed it into the side of the head of the first of the two advancing men. He too went down. Roger squared with the remaining man, and with a still open hand, he delivered a forceful blow to the man's nose in an upward motion, breaking it and causing blood to pour out. He then closed his fist and delivered the final blow, a punch square to the solar plexus region of the chest, sending him to the floor. The fight was over. Roger looked to the bartender as if to ask, "Are we square?" The bartender nodded for Roger to look over at a man sitting at a table off to the side. The man stood up as Roger made eye contact with him. He was a smaller man with thin, wire-rimmed glasses. He too was wearing jungle combat boots and had on an olive, drab boonie hat. He clapped his hands together slowly 3 times as he approached Roger. "Well, well, well," he said, as he glanced at his watch. "That was quick. I knew it would be, but I must admit I thought it was going to turn out differently." Roger didn't speak. The man motioned over to the bartender. "Butch, give me 2 of those pulled pork sandwiches to go. Put a 6-pack in with it, too. My new friend and I will be out back in the garage." He looked at Roger. "Not to be presumptuous, but I'm hoping we can be friends. Can we be friends?" Roger paused as he looked at him. "I don't even know you, and I'm just passing through, so I really won't have time for any new friends." The man put out his 2 hands at his side, palms up, and shrugged. He smiled as he said, "Well, I'm not laying on the floor, so that's something, ain't it?" He offered his hand to Roger to shake. "Name's Buddy Tanner. Pleased to meet you." Roger continued to look at him without offering his hand. Buddy said, "Too soon? I understand. Look, it would be a real shame if you left without trying one of Butch's pulled pork sandwiches. And since my rude friends ruined yours, it's the least I could do. Please accept my invite out to the garage and back. We'll eat in peace and enjoy a couple cold ones." Roger looked back at the 3 men who were just getting to their feet. Buddy looked over at them. "You guys get yourself cleaned up now. Have a drink." Then he looked at Roger. "It'll just be you and me, friend. I feel like you and them got off on the wrong foot." Roger looked out the window to watch the bus pull out and head down the road. He sighed. He was still hungry, and at this point, what did he have to lose? He followed Buddy out to the garage.